Well, we conservatives are law-abiding people, and the idea of committing felony crimes is not something we spend an awful lot of time thinking about. But I have to tell you, for the last 6, 7, 8 months or so ago, I've been giving serious thought as to whether or not to commit myself to becoming a felon. And the reason that I had these thoughts was because the AR-15 that I bought back in 2011 in California, which was 100% illegal at the time, at the end of June was going to become illegal, and I had a choice of doing one of two things. I could either modify the rifle in such a way that the pistol grip wouldn't function. There's a piece of plastic that basically prevents you from grabbing the pistol grip. And I'd have to lose the forward grip, and I'd have to make some other changes to the weapon. Or I could keep my AR-15 the exact same way it was when I registered it and bought it legally in California in 2011. But if I keep it that way, then I would have to register with the state of California as the owner of an assault weapon. Just before we get down to the details here, I did a little video up at a tremendous gun range, Oak Tree Gun Range in California, where I talked about legal, illegal. So I want to talk about the California AR-15 debacle with my friends Steve Green and Scott Ott here. So gentlemen, here's the choice I was facing. If I decided that I didn't want to register my weapon, I had to basically make the weapon ridiculous. And when I say ridiculous, because this plastic guard that I would have to put on the gun to make it legal can be removed with 3 Phillips head screws in about 20 seconds. So there was that. Or I could have kept it the way I bought it when it was legal and then registered it as an assault weapon, and I was told, which was not my inclination, but here's the thing. If I'd registered in California as an assault weapon, I would have the right to take that rifle to and from the shooting range, point A to point B, and that's all. And it was pointed out to me that if I were to stop at a McDonald's on the way home and go through the drive-through window to get a Coke, technically I am now in felony violation because I have not gone directly from point A to point B. I've gone to point C as well. This is the rules in California. So it's a big victory, and I want to tell you why. Steve, back in 2011 when I bought the AR-15, they suddenly had a rule change that ended up in selling hundreds of thousands of these rifles here in California. And it was something called the bullet button. So this is the theme I'm trying to get at.
I remember the bullet button.
So this is the theme I'm trying to get at here. So back in around 2010 or so, the liberals running the state of California decided that in order to get rid of the AR-15, they were going to create a list of qualities that the weapon had to have. They couldn't just ban manufacturers specifically because they're just getting new manufacturers, right? You can't write legislation every week. Somebody just opens a new country and they're going to give people what they want to own. And the more they tried to suppress it, needless to say, the more people wanted to have one. So what happened was, right around 2010, California said you can have a legal AR-15 in this state, but the loophole was that the definition of the assault rifle was that it had to have a detachable magazine. And so lawyers for the good guys, for the American people, said, well, what's your definition? I'm going to get to the whole California thing in terms of the larger issue in a minute. But the lawyers for the good guys said, well, what's the definition of a detachable magazine? And California said, well, a detachable magazine is a magazine that can be removed from the rifle without the use of a tool. Okay? So what they did was they took out the normal little latch that normally drops the magazine out of the bottom of the rifle, and instead of just being a lever that you push, they put it in like a little round guard, and if you put like the tip of a ballpoint pen in there, you can drop the magazine, but it's now legal because they have to use a tool to do it.
Or say the tip of a .223 round.
They call it the bullet button because it's exactly the size of the round of the .223 round that the AR-15 fires, and you just put a bullet in there and drop the mag. People were selling rings that had a little tiny little metal extension. Just do it like that. But you got around the law because of that rule. When I was up at the gun shop, Steve, I've never been to a gun show, at the gun range, they said to me, you know, if the people that were writing these laws knew anything about guns, we'd actually be in some real trouble here.
Right. Okay. Well, okay. Let me show you something here real quick. All right. This is my AR-15. I'm here in Colorado. You'll notice I don't have a sight on there yet. I'm still getting good with the iron sights. Colorado is not completely unstupid. We've got one little bit of California type nonsense. This 30-round magazine is now illegal to buy or sell in Colorado. But I've had this particular magazine for longer than the law, so it got grandfathered in. I've had the magazine longer than I've had the rifle, if you can believe that. I had my 12-year-old fire this for the first time a couple of months ago, and you should have seen the smile on his face after the first time he squeezed that trigger and felt that kick and put a bullet in the black. Happy boy. And the kid's a good shot.
That's the little circle in the middle of the target that Steve's referring to.
Yes, that's right. It's right there. Because of racism or something, I suppose. Anyway, it's a really fun rifle to shoot. Colorado has a much more laissez-faire attitude than California does. If I want to get the chainsaw attachment, I can do that. The under-the-barrel chainsaw is legal. I can, if I so choose, mount a lightsaber on here for the sight. There are all kinds of things I can do because I don't live in Colorado. But Bill, when you talk about
California,
yeah, when you talk about stupid laws and what are we going to do about them, let me tell you the story of how I bought this AR-15. I'm not much of a rifle shooter. I never have been. I've always just had a kick of a time shooting pistols, and I have a nice collection of pistols. But do you remember, I guess it was the summer of 2015, maybe 16, when Senator Joe Manchin, after one of these shootings, said, "Due process is what's killing us." A United States senator, really just openly violating his oath to defend the Constitution, saying due process is what's killing us. So it was summer break when this happened. I loaded up the kids in the car, including my niece who was visiting from Texas, and we drove up to Cabela's, and I bought an AR-15 just as a middle finger salute to Joe freaking Manchin, who, by the way, is hopefully going to go down in defeat in November there in West Virginia. So, Bill, I feel for you. This decision comes. Some stupid politician says or does something that is going to turn a law-abiding citizen into a criminal for not having done anything after the law was passed, just stripping away our rights. And if I were you, I don't know what I'd do, Bill. I really don't know what I'd do except maybe to get out of Dodge. Texas, Colorado, something. We've got some awfully nice states. In fact, all the other 49 states.
And I'll get to that in my close. Scott, when they came up with the bullet button, when the common sense people of America basically outfoxed these progressive lawyers who'd spent probably years and years and years working on this list of things.
Yeah.
Oh, detachable magazine, no problem. The bullet button meant that California sold hundreds of thousands of AR-15s. That's when I bought mine. I bought mine, like Steve said. I saw Barack Obama after a Tea Party event I was speaking at. I was in the hotel. I saw him on TV saying, "I don't know what these Tea Party people are all about. I'm doing so much for the country." I said, "Yeah, I'm buying the gun tomorrow." But, Scott, here's the mechanism that's in my little legal, illegal video. Because what I was doing was I was in the gun shop at Oak Tree, and I just had this modification done. I was prepared to have to deal with all of these ridiculous things. Front grip has to come off. The front flash suppressor has to come off. The telescope stock had to come. All these things had to come off. And I was saying, well, okay, because I'm not going to register this rifle. I'm just not going to do it. And I was preparing to do that because I would prefer not to be a felon, frankly.
Sure.
So just before this thing happened at the end of June, they came out and looked at the new law, which was designed to ban the AR-15 because the last law that was designed to ban the AR-15 ended up selling something like 1 million AR-15s. Okay?
God bless America.
Yeah.
Right. So we're all preparing for something called the featureless AR-15, which meant, they get to lose the pistol grip and all this other stuff. And then somebody took a look at the new law. And what they did was they put a $70 modification, and here's what the modification does, and here's why it makes my gun, which was formerly going to be illegal, now absolutely legal, even though it's the same gun. The AR-15, many of our enthusiasts know, is basically the upper and the lower, and they're held together by 2 pins, and you have to remove these pins to get the lower out, and you can clean the weapon that way and so on. Now, they looked at the law, and the law said that reloading the weapon would be illegal, but it would be legal if you disassembled the weapon in order to reload it. And in fact, prior to the bullet button, Bushmaster made an AR-15 for California that had the magazine welded shut. You literally had to take the gun apart to put another 10 rounds in there. But what they did was they put a little spring-loaded pin on the back receiver. And when you pull this pin, you crack the back open that wide. That allows the magazine to be loaded. And because you've cracked it that wide, you have disassembled your rifle. And that means now that the bullet button is gone, which means you can reload much, much faster now. It's much faster. Because now I just go crack, pump, drop, and boom, and click, and it goes back in. So by breaking by having a removable back pin on the rifle, if it had stayed this way, illegal, legal, illegal, legal, illegal, legal, legal, illegal, legal, illegal, legal, illegal. See how effective it is at keeping people safe? They're going to sell another million AR-15. So the point I'm trying to get at here, Scott, is this. Putting aside all the moral issues, which I've dealt with before, and I'll try and do a quick summary of on the close. These people are not very smart, and they certainly don't know what they're talking about. And it never ceases to amaze and amuse and inspire me to think that some guy in a workshop with a pair of pliers has figured out a way to circumvent this unconstitutional evil law designed to make people feel better at cocktail parties at the expense of making millions of law-abiding citizens. I've never had a misdemeanor in 59 years, suddenly felons, and some guy in a workshop in a gun shop someplace says, you know what, if we just pull this little pin, it disassembles my rifle, and we circumvent them. It's almost like God is on our side or something.
Well, I don't know whose side God is on in this particular situation, but Bill, I think what you don't understand is the value of making life really complicated for people who are determined to shoot up a school, for example, or wade into a crowd. If you can bog them down in paperwork and regulations, if you can,
put a plastic vein on a rifle that can be unscrewed in 20 seconds or something.
Exactly. If you can make it more difficult for them, because and I've I shouldn't confess to this, but I've talked to some of these guys, and they're telling me the money they're spending just on compliance alone makes it difficult for them to just wade into an elementary school and shoot the place up. I mean, they don't have time for that. They've got they've got attorneys, they've got mechanical guys, they've got this whole
and there's
team
all those non-parking. And there's no good parking anywhere.
And you've got to go to the government office and all that kind of stuff. So, just that's the idea, is anything with enough compliance and enough or regulation that enforces compliance that you can stop criminals from doing things. Once again, the genius of it is that good people who actually only own weapons for simple enjoyment, recreational purposes, or as a defensive mechanism in case they are attacked, are bogged down with a bunch of stuff, and it doesn't address the core problem. It doesn't deal with evil in the human heart. There's no bullet button for that. There is no way that you can just, pull a pin and solve that problem. And so they're missing the point over and over again. I'm sure you're aware, but right now in England, they have a huge rash of murders. Well, of course, in England, it's almost impossible to own a gun. So most of the murders are happening with knives. So now they think they're going to take everybody's knives away. First, they're going to get people to voluntarily give up their knives. You know who voluntarily gives up their knives first? At the front of the line are those guys who were just about to go on a mad stabbing spree in the subway. They're like, well, I was going to go on this stabbing spree.
I was going to commit mass murder of children, but now I realize that owning a knife is illegal. Exactly. I better turn this thing in.
Here you go. And I'll get my my McDonald's coupon in exchange for it or whatever it is. So it would be comical if you portrayed this in a movie. It would be absurd. What is not comical is the fact that people with power to affect our lives, to tax our pocketbooks, and to put us in prison have exercised this kind of wisdom at the public expense and for the public good so-called. And so I'm glad, once again, American innovation has gotten around the propensity of legislators to think that they can foil human nature.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to make a couple quick points in response to some of the comments that I got on that legal illegal video. I've explained the mechanism. Some people wanted to know what it was all about, and we just talked about that. A number of people said, "Why are you still living in California? Why don't you come to the United States? It's very nice in America." I've heard that's true. I grew up in America, as a matter of fact. I'm here. I'll give you the same answer I always give to people when they ask me this, and that is that, look, if you're going to be a volcanologist, you got to live under the volcano, right? I mean, somebody has to be here to see where the leading edge of stupidity is. Somebody's got to be here to see what's going on and what's coming, because it's coming from west to east. And that is my honest reason, that and the fact that the climate, and having grown up in Florida, no mosquitoes, no humidity, you can have California when you pry it from my cold, dead feet.
I used to love California. I really feel for you.
We had a number of comments saying, you have no one to blame but yourself because you've allowed the erosion of these freedoms, and that stings quite a bit for me, I have to tell you. Those kind of things really do sting, because I often ask myself, what would it take to stop this progressive thing? But I will tell you this, if you were the first person to open fire on somebody who knocks on your door to see if you've registered your handgun or your rifle, I completely admire your constitutional fidelity, but I have some questions about, whether or not this is a sound course of action. This is, in fact, the issue. What are you going to do? Are you going to shoot when people come for it? I don't have the answer for that, but let me just say one or two things. First of all, the reason I went to all this trouble and didn't simply keep the weapon the way it was, which seems my moral right to have the weapon in the first place, and secondly, I bought it legally and so on, why did I go to the trouble of modifying it? Well, because I'm a law-abiding citizen. I don't particularly want the idea of a felony conviction on my head over something that I have a right to have anyway. That's the law. That's the rules. As Scott said in the Trump episode, Trump and North Korea, doesn't serve any purpose to talk about what would be nice. You have to deal with what is. So there's all of that. But I want to just say two things about this that go to motive. First of all, you have to ask yourself why progressives do this. What is it about the AR-15 that they find so offensive? And it is a symbol, it's a totem that they think if you throw the AR-15 into the volcano, the murders will stop. Yeah. I think the reaction of them, the reason they feel so strongly about gun control is because it's a combination of things. Some people are psychologically and emotionally and materially prepared to defend their lives with weapons, and other people are not. And if you're one of the people who are not, it bothers you that some people are able to defend themselves. If you're not capable of the emotional necessity of pulling a gun on somebody and defending your life, if you're not capable of doing that, you don't want anybody to be capable of doing that. You may not recognize that as your motivation, but I think that's a large part of it. A second thing involved is that for so many liberals, it's a perk. Self-protection is a perk. It comes with being a progressive. In other words, big gun banners like Barbara Boxer and Dianne Feinstein have armed security guards. All of these movie stars who talk about how much they want gun control have armed security guards. The ability to have their lives protected for these limousine liberals is a perk of being rich and famous. I have somebody to protect my life with guns because I'm rich and famous and I can afford it. And you can't, so it's another reason why I'm better than you people down in flyover country. These are all parts of the psychology behind it. But the main thing is simply this, I think. You have to understand that the reason that people like me have these weapons is because people like you are trying to take them away from us. It's really just that simple. I have an assault rifle, if you want to call it that. I have a semi-automatic weapon because there are people who are actively trying to take it away from me, a law-abiding citizen. And I've heard many people say, I will stop insisting on owning guns when you stop trying to take them away from us. Folks, this is clear to everybody on the conservative side of the aisle, and it's an utter mystery to people on the left. So let me just spell it out for you. We have these weapons not so that we can fight against the loss of our freedoms by an army or police force or whatever, we have the weapons to deter them from ever making the attempt, you see? To deter them from making the attempt. We want to make it exceedingly difficult for an army or a police state to come and take people out of our homes the way the Jews were taken out of their homes and the kulaks were taken out of their homes and the Chinese intellectuals were taken out of their homes and 200 million people taken out of their homes and shot. We want to deter it, right? That's why we have it. And I'll close just by saying this. My Russian wife, who is a much better shot than me, by the way, she's a terrifyingly good shot. She's a photographer. She knows how to hold things still. But she lives in Russia before she came here. And in Moscow, in your apartment, every door on the apartment was steel. And there were 3 or 4 deadlocks on every door. You are essentially locking yourself in a vault at night to keep yourself safe. There are no guns available in Russia. This is to keep yourself from people knocking down the door and knifing you or beating you over the head or whatever. And she said to me one night, Bill, we've got this tiny little deadbolt and we've got this decorative glass around our door. What possible good can this do to keep us safe? And I said, honey, the glass and the door aren't there to keep us safe. The glass is there to wake me up. It's the gun under the bed that keeps us safe. And the fact that people know that American citizens are armed deters them from kicking down the door. Yeah. Because they don't want to get killed. And so by having these things, you see, we're not actually in calling for murder and crime. We are preventing crime by allowing the criminals who are predators upon humanity to understand that there are serious consequences, whether it's from the government or from a guy who's trying to steal your TV set. We are complicating their targeting solution and making that predator have second thoughts about whether or not to attack this particular gazelle, because the horns on this gazelle could be exceedingly sharp. It's really pretty simple. We are peace-loving, peacemaking people. We hate war, and that's why we're prepared for it. If there's any other questions you need some help with, you can feel write us right here at Right Angle. And if this message means anything to you, they're made possible by the paying members at BillWhittle.com. And if you want to go over there and join us, you can help me stay in this land of lunacy and point out to you why the good people here in this state also have a right to a voice. That'll do it for this Right Angle. We'll see you next week right here with Steve Green and Scott Ott.